Hey. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Velocity Visions, can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up, everybody, if you can hear me? How's everybody doing tonight? I'd like to welcome you to the We Inspire Before I Let Go movement. Thank you, Rosanna. How you doing tonight? Pearls Incorporated, how you doing? All right. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you for joining us. We'll get started momentarily. Thank you for being with us tonight. Kevin Wiggins, I see you. How's it going? Elite Baker, thank you for joining us tonight. Cinder Peace, am I saying that right? Cinder Peace, how you doing? Doing good? Okay. All right, everybody, my name is Demarcus McGaughey, and I am one of the 2020 ambassadors for WeINSPIRE. And again, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. This is part of our service project. And myself along, Jamar, there you go. We were waiting on you, man. We were waiting for the CEO and for the founder to join us tonight. Thank you for gracing us with your presence tonight, man. Let me send you a wave too. There you go. Oh, man. But as I was saying, my name is Demarcus McGaughey, and I am one of 4 of the 2020 ambassadors for WeINSPIRE. And I'd like to say again, just thank you for joining us tonight. Myself, along with Natasha and Antoine and Jody, this is one of the service projects that we came up with to talk about mental health for the month of May. I think maybe about back in maybe March. I think maybe it was like March we came up with this project to do this for this whole week from May 18th to May 24th. So you will see a lot of branding and promotions with WeINSPIRE, and you'll be seeing a lot of things that I say before I let go. And my question to you, if you're joining us tonight, is what would you do before you let go? Or what will you do before you let go? Meaning, before you hit that point, before you hit like that low point, before it gets serious, before it gets to suicide, before it gets to like just a bad place, like what would you do? Myself is, you see this painting in the background, is I'm also an artist and I am a graphic designer and life coach. And for myself is I would probably paint before I let go. Or I would probably work out, go to the gym before I let go. I try to do all these things of self-care that gets me to a point to where I have worthiness for myself and I have love for myself, and which therefore creates love and abundance around me with the people that are around me as well too. So I'd like to just ask the question, if anybody is in here, let me see. Okay, if anybody's in here, I'd like to ask, like, what would you do before you let go? Let's see in the comments. Is there anybody out there? I would like to know. And Jamar, if you're here, maybe you could take some notes. Or one of the ambassadors, Jody, Antoine, or Natasha could take notes so that we could publish your comments this week to let the world know what you would do before you let go. Am I saying it right? Isheem's, I see you. We have a special guest in 1 minute, so I have to leave the floor open for her to join, and then maybe we can get you in before we end it for the night. Again, my name is Demarcus McGaughey. I am a certified life coach. I am an artist, and I'm a freelance graphic designer, and I'm one of 4 of the 2020 WeINSPIRE ambassadors. And again, Jamar, I would like to just say thank you for creating this platform for the world to produce good news within the world and to impact the world, and also for just carving out a space to allow me to be an ambassador to work along with your brand and with the board of directors and doing my part in impacting the world. So I thank you. And again, I thank everyone for being part of We Inspire. And we'll get started. So on the floor, we have Cindy Bautista-Thomas. She is one of a close friends of mine, and she is a co-founder of Velocity Visions Incorporated. Cindy, if you are in the room, could you send me a request so I can patch you in? Take a deep breath and then hit the request button. And then we'll patch you in so that the world can meet you and so that we can get started on Before I Let Go. Let's see. Serena, how you doing? Thank you for joining us tonight. Josie, I see you. Natasha, there's Natasha. Let me send her a wave. There's Natasha. She's one of our ambassadors. Thank you for joining, Natasha. All right, Cindy. Let me see if I can get you patched in. Okay. All right. Here we go. Feel Love 7. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you. Cindy Bautista-Thomas.
Hello, Demarcus. So great to see you.
I'm so happy to see you. How you holding up over there?
I'm doing more than holding up. I'm doing outstanding, actually.
Amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight with We Inspire. I'm just really excited for like the world to get to know you and to hear your stories and to hear your experiences and to create some awareness around this topic and to support some individuals and to support friends and family and to support a whole community around mental health and what we can do um, to fight the stigma of it and to create conversations and authentic and vulnerable conversations
Yeah.
with this. So,
hmm
so welcome to We Inspire.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank
I'm
you so
glad to
much
have
for the
you.
invitation, We Inspire Movement. I'm so just energized by the work that you're doing. It's wonderful.
Well, we owe it all to Jamal. And again, like I said, with Jody, Antoine, which we like to call Antoine AD, and Natasha. This was like one of the service projects that we had, and thank you for again for being a part of it with us. So I want to start it off with you. Like, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your background, about your experience, what you do, and joining us for tonight.
Absolutely. So I'm a Bronx-born Afro-Latina, first generation, currently residing in Yonkers, New York, but I always rep the Bronx everywhere that I go. And I am also a mom of two teenagers. I'm a caregiver of a mom with Alzheimer's. I'm also a spouse to an amazing husband, Chef Winston Thomas.
Mm,
And I am also a PhD candidate in urban education at the CUNY Graduate Center. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and have been for the last 20 years. Currently, I am a higher ed professional. I am also co-founder of Velocity Visions Inc. Velocity Visions Inc. is a personal and professional development company uh, and consultancy. We work with organizations, nonprofit, corporate, school entities to provide training, workshops, retreat experiences, really to help support the overall and holistic wellness of organizations based on whatever topics relevant to the needs of the constituency. We cover social work topics, general case note topics, as well as a topic we have been asked to work on at this time is on grief, bereavement, coping
mm,
strategies around mental health and wellness, and of course, my favorite topic, self-care and the
mm.
importance of self-care as a preventive measure around stress impacts, particularly around mental health and wellness.
Okay. Um, first off, real quick, I see AD just joined. Just Fashion Guru. You'll see AD is one of our ambassadors. He's here tonight. Thank you, AD,
Right.
for being here. And my friend Jasmine, I just see that she just joined. And AD, I see you. Cindy, back to you. My favorite topic is also self-care too. And I believe that it took me a while to even realize that self-care was important.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit about what self-care is for you.
Yeah, I mean, self-care for me has become paramount to my existence because there was a time where it was not. and where I was literally burning myself out in the business of sort of supporting and helping others. I was burning myself out in the process. And that tends to happen a lot to people in the helping profession, teachers, social workers, right, caregivers. And for me, self-care is about loving on yourself to the point where you set boundaries with individuals and many times with employers, with friends, with colleagues, but setting boundaries so that you're really telling yourself how you love yourself so much that you will make decisions where you center all of who you are, what you want to do, and what you're looking to create. And it definitely sounds easier said than
Mm-hmm.
done. But once you sort of set the parameters around that, like you let people know how they can move in the space of who you are. And of course that takes practice and it takes cojones, right? It definitely
No bulto. Yo
no
entiendo.
bulto, right? And so I see a lot of my friends are joining and I'm so happy to see that so many folks are joining in this conversation on a Wednesday evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. You could have been anywhere, but you're here with us today, and we inspire. We thank you for being here with us. All right. Okay. So when talking about the self-care, like, did you find it difficult to like create these boundaries?
Initially, yes. I mean, I'm the youngest of seven, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
when you think about what that does to any of y'all out there that are the youngest of siblings in a Dominican household, right? You often have to fight for attention, for resources, right? And for voice. And
Mm-hmm.
so it really comes from a place of finding voice, finding who I am in the world, and really then making decisions around what are the things that I really love to do, what are the things that make me feel alive and thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's one thing around sort of just surviving, a whole nother level of thriving that we all get to create those spaces given the courage, right? It's also having courage. It's also being able to be so in touch with who you are that you know what those things are that you need to let go. I love that the
Mm-hmm.
theme is
Oh,
before I let go. I
yeah.
just love that because so many of us are doing things and are around people that we need to have let go a long time ago. So I love that that's the theme. So it's
Mm-hmm.
being able to actually identify what are the things that I need to let go in my life. And they aren't necessarily things. Sometimes they're ways of being, that ways of talking to yourself, ways of thinking about, how you are being perceived, how you perceive yourself, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
all of those things are not things that most people find easy. Some people are sort of raised with those ideals. But for many of us, our families dealt with a lot of oppression, racism, and continue to do so. And so sometimes that impacts the way they parent and impacts the decision making that we make particularly around sort of how we show up in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, self-care is really breaking down those barriers and allowing for the possibility to show up.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because speaking from my experience, I am such a giver, and being the fact that I am a freelancer and I have clients, I used to always have this mentality. It's kind of like Puff Daddy hustle mentality that I have to work and I have to grind, I have to hustle. Like the mindset and the belief that I had is I had to work all night to
Mm.
be successful. Or I had to work 7 days a week. Like, can't nobody hustle as hard as me? Can't nobody work as hard as me? And the moment where I found out about like, self-care, I found it very difficult for me to incorporate self-care in my weekly regimen. You know, and
Mm.
once I was taught about self-care, I think like for me, like Fridays ended up becoming my self-care day.
Okay.
And on Fridays, it's like I love it because for 90 days I practiced this, but now
Mm.
it's like it's a part of my life, like it's a part of my being. And so Fridays, like I wake up whenever I want to wake up. I answer the phone whenever I want to answer the phone. I just do whatever I want to do whatever makes me happy. And then I set the boundaries, you know. And for a
Exactly.
minute, I did not think that my clients would accept that I'm not working on a Friday, you know. But like you said, I had to set the boundaries. And what I noticed what supported me was when I would tell clients, I only work Monday through Thursdays. And they were like, oh, you're not working Fridays? And I'm like, no, I don't work Fridays because I have to create a work-life balance. And then it was kind of like, I noticed things like kind of shifted. And people were like, oh, work-life balance, you know, oh, self-care, you know. But then I also find it for myself that when Monday comes, I'm more energized. You know,
Exactly.
I'm able to like be more productive when it comes to work and to better support my clients, you know. So
Mm,
thank you on that.
yeah.
Um, let's talk about um, where are you in mental health or like the vibrations of mental health? Like how can we identify, you know,
Mm.
if we are dealing with mental illness, or how can we identify with like our thoughts and the voices
Hmm.
that we tell ourselves and the things that are like in our brains?
Absolutely. So first, thank you for sharing what you shared because I know I tried to contact you on a Friday about something and you were like, I got my self-care. I was like, all right, Demarcus, you better come through with your self-care. So that I
You got too
mean
little time.
that's what I'm talking about. Now people anyway, so first of all, self-awareness.
Mhm.
Self-awareness is so critical to mental health, right? Self-awareness is the ability to know how you're feeling, right? And to identify the emotions that are related to how you might show up, right? And so
Mhm.
currently we're dealing with a really crazy time, right? Like we would be remiss if we didn't talk about what we're experiencing right now. We're
Mhm.
experiencing a global pandemic, right? Many of us are staying at home, right? Some of us are you're going out. I see y'all going
Mhm.
out. I hope you're wearing your PPE, right? Many of us have this home life integration thing going on that we've never experienced. Those of us that are teachers all of a sudden,
Mhm.
academic teachers, because
Mhm.
I hope that many of us that are parents, that we were all caregivers, we were already our children's first teachers, but now we're doing the academic piece in a more intense way, right? And then lastly, many of us were already dealing with life. Like life didn't just stop because the pandemic showed up. Some of us may have been having insecurity in terms of food and finances, right? So those are factors that may have already been making presence in our wellness, mental health wellness, right? And you can get a sense that mental health is getting to a place where you need to seek professional support, right? And seek support in other ways as well when you're not sleeping well, when you're
Mhm.
finding that you're starting to experience nightmares. Maybe your eating habits have changed. I'm not talking about the eating all day because you're bored, right?
Mhm.
Because some of us are doing that, right? But I'm talking about the not eating at all or eating excessively to the point of nauseum, right? I'm
Mhm.
talking about when something impacts you, particularly those of you in the caregiving professions, impact you to the degree where you're experiencing what we call vicarious trauma, where you're starting to think about the people that you're working with, when you're starting to think about the stories that you've been hearing throughout the days. And some of us experience that, and that's not even the field that we're working in, right?
Mhm.
When you find that watching the news really gives you a higher level of anxiety, right? Some of you may already sort of have a disposition where you're susceptible to depression and anxiety because you have family members, and mental health could be hereditary, right? Like there are mental health diagnoses that you may find that your family members, grandparents, great grandparents may have had. They may not have identified it as a mental health condition,
Mhm.
but then when you hear stories, you start to make the connections, right? I would also think about when you start disconnecting from people, right? We're in this time where we can't physically see people. As human beings, we need connection. We need it. Like we need human touch. It's been scientifically proven. There's been tons of studies around when folks are not uh, in ability to have physical touch, how they deteriorate, It's been studies done, right? And so if you find yourself that you are disconnecting, where people are calling you to connect and you're no longer taking those calls, right now we're not physically seeing each other in the ways that we did before, but sometimes folks are inviting us to Zoom parties, and you may have shown up to those parties in the past, but then you find yourself sort of withdrawing. And when that becomes, and I'm not talking about the self-care withdrawal that we do sometimes, just to kind of like need time to myself. We're talking about the kind of withdrawal where people don't hear from you anymore and you've sort of dropped off. If you start to notice those kinds of behaviors that are unusual for you, then that's the time to say, you know what? This isn't the my usual way of being. This is the time that you want to connect with a professional, right? I see a therapist and I announce it to the world because I think that mental health and wellness is a right. Many of you have health insurance that pay for it. There are so many free services right now because of what's happening with COVID-19, right? But there are also a lot of hotlines and services. And in our traditions, I come from a Latinx background where mental health and wellness, sometimes there's a myth, right? There's a stigma around mental health and wellness. And the truth is, I love my therapist. And I am all of who I am because of my amazing therapist, right? And my therapist happens to be a woman of color, right? But I used to see a therapist that was not, and it was all good, too, right? And so when those things start to show up for you, and even if you observing those behaviors in your homegirl and your homeboy, maybe talk. EAP, thank you, Serena. That's right. EAP will pay for a few services, a few sessions for free. Thank you, Serena.
Good
And
resource.
then,
Thank you.
yes, that's an excellent resource. And they will do family therapy, family counseling, individual counseling. Therapy is dope. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's how I
And
found it
so,
tomorrow right there.
oh, all right, Jamal. That's right. Therapy is dope. And so, I encourage, if you're feeling those things that I mentioned before, and even more, like sometimes it's physical.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you start to get migraines. Sometimes it's like that back pain that starts from the nape of your neck
Mm-hmm.
down to your shoulder. Sometimes it's the lower back pain. So it shows up, physical, it shows up emotional, and sometimes it shows up spiritual, where maybe you are someone that used to connect spiritually to a church, to a community of believers, whatever that belief system is, and then you find yourself feeling empty, no longer making those connections, then that's when you would want to reach out.
Mm-hmm. I
Hmm.
like that. AD says that he is alive
And the
and the
man, oh,
man I
sharing
am help with
information.
the therapy. All right.
Thanks you all
Okay.
for sharing this today. Oh,
Thank
hello,
you. Thank you for
Terrell.
being one.
That's
All
right,
right, Terrell.
Terrell.
We see
Yes,
Terrell
yes.
loves us. My question is, so now my question is that you have this bomb ass therapist, right?
Hmm.
That you found this woman of color. How did you get to the point to where you started, that you thought that it was okay to look for therapy?
I appreciate that question. So I'm in a PhD program,
Hmm.
completing my dissertation. I'm raising two teenagers. One of them was going through the college process. I was dealing with another person who mattered, and work was crazy. And I realized I'm very social. I'm an extrovert, and I love people. I love connections, and I love helping and supporting. And I'm doing all this work around self-care, right?
Hmm.
And my practices started to my self-care game is strong, like you, very strong,
Hmm.
paramount. But I started to dwindle,
Okay.
and I realized that I started to get very irritable with my children and irritable at home for no reason, right? Like I was starting to snap. And then it was one day where I usually enjoy watching Blackish with my son. That's one of
Hmm.
the bonding activities we do. And one day he was like, "Mom, it's time to watch Blackish." And I was like, "Ah." And I had never done that. And he was like, "Are you okay?" And then I said to myself, "You know what? No, Cindy, you are not okay."
Hmm.
And that's when I realized that it was time to talk to someone. And I have a very amazing circle of amazing friends, right? And that we connect with, we talk, we vibe. But I definitely felt like it was a different level of support that I needed at that time.
Hmm.
And that's when I reached out.
And now take us through the process of the steps. Like, so so you realize that, Cindy, I'm not okay,
Right.
and maybe your friends suggested maybe you may need therapy. So how did you go about even looking for a therapist? How did you even know, like, to go through like your job for like insurance, for
That's an
that?
excellent question. So first, so I went through two rendition of therapists. So I want to talk
Hmm.
about this because this is important.
Hmm.
So I did the EAP thing where I asked the company for a therapist that took my insurance. So that way I didn't have to pay for the co-payment for three
Hmm.
sessions, right? Trying to beat
Smart.
the system a little
That's
bit.
smart. Hey.
And it was a white Jewish woman. We vibed for a few sessions. And then I realized that there was a little bit of a disconnect, not even because she was white, because I've had white therapists that were amazing, but it was definitely a different sort of way of doing therapy. Because I am a professional and I have a lot of years in the field, she thought that I was there to get mentored and not
Mm.
for therapy, right? And so I kindly terminated my relationship with my therapist, and I had to realize, like, this connection isn't working. I don't feel that I am growing in this relationship, this therapeutic alliance. And what I decided to do is I have a whole bunch of friends on Facebook that are therapists. So
Hmm.
I inboxed one of my friends and
Oh.
I'm looking for a woman of color. Like, I just felt like I needed to vibe with a woman of color. And so she recommended someone that had my health insurance. And I've also helped support other people go to resources such as Psychology Today,
Hmm.
Therapy for Black Girls. There's another app that I can't recall right now, but if someone knows that app, if they could put it in the chat, there are a couple of websites where communities of color have gotten together, therapists of color, for those that feel that working with someone within their background would be a better fit. It definitely works for some folks, not for everyone. For me, it was the best relationship that I ever terminated.
Mm.
After 6 months, we terminated, and I found that other therapist like 2 months later, and I'm so grateful that I did that.
You went longer than a lot of people that I know. 6 months is a while.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. I see Jasmine says sometimes it takes more than one experience to find the right balance. I totally agree
Absolutely.
with you. That was my experience. That was my experience. I think by the time I felt that it was okay to find a therapist, I had tried to do all these different things. I had tried to like self-diagnose myself,
Mm,
Um, I tried to, because I come from a background of a very spiritual, very church Southern Baptist background.
mm,
We were like in Texas, like we were very rooted in our religion, and that was
mm,
always my therapy growing up. Um, and then it was like I would just pray. I would pray. I would pray. I would pray. But it was kind of like faith without works is dead. And it was like I need someone to talk to. And then it's like I did talk to some pastors, I believe, certain times, but they just like kept hitting me with the scriptures, which is fine, but it
mm,
was like I felt like there was a part of me that felt like they didn't see me, like there was like the scriptures was the barrier between us, and I couldn't
absolutely.
authentically communicate. And I remember my best friend saying, maybe you should see a therapist. And I was like, oh, I don't want to see no therapist. I don't need to see no therapist. I'm a man, I'm a black man, and we don't
Hmm.
have those kind of conversations. We keep all our things in. But I didn't realize how much I didn't realize how much I was hurting myself. You
Mm,
know, I didn't realize that I had years of experiences, trauma, uh, and just people like talking to me, how much I had absorbed all of this and how much those experiences um, shifted my life, how much I've made decisions based off experiences that I've had, based off people that I've spoken to, and even the conversations that I had with myself. I created these conversations with myself based off something that someone has said to me, and then I think I had like kind of like a similar situation. I found a therapist that I didn't like. Then I ended up finding a therapist who specifically, I thank God for him. He specifically worked with men and men of color. So I was able to go in. I was able to be a man and to be a powerful man and to be a vulnerable man. So and I think I was with him for like maybe a year. I was with him for maybe a year. So I really do thank him for that. So okay.
Powerful.
So I've spoken to some friends. I know we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Like I've spoken to some people, and anyone, if you have any questions, type them into the comments, and so I can ask that for Cindy as well too as we move on through this intimate conversation. And again, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. We are. I'm sorry, I was reading something. Thank you, Jamar. I've experienced sharing my history of trauma to a therapist of color during our intake, only to realize I couldn't afford her rates. I encourage others to ask upfront the cost if outside insurance. Thank you. That's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one. I definitely do believe in like know what you're signing up for. That's like setting the boundaries as well too. Just knowing what you're signing up for. What are you purchasing? What are you buying? I know we talked about a little bit. How can people maneuver through this time and when it's pertaining to grief and through this COVID-19? How can people? What are some things, some resources, or some tools that maybe you can let our viewers know?
Of course. First of all, there is a lot available, and what you get to do is figure out what works for you, right? Like what works for someone else is not going to work for you. I've been seeing a lot of posts on social media around, oh, this is the time to write the book, to paint the house, to, create a business, right? For many of us, this is a time to rest, right? And that's okay too, right? What's really important is that we feel all the feelings that are showing up, right? For some of us, working from home is a nightmare, right? I am very clear about my boundaries with work and home. I've always been. I've never like worked while I'm home in terms of my 9 to 5 stuff. But now, like, I have no choice, right? Like 9 to 5, I'm here, and then, and so I had to sort of figure out, like, so that first week I was jacked up a little bit. I was like, wait, when do I start? When do I end, right? And I realized that I had to set certain parameters around how that was going to look like, right? But it was okay for me to feel the feelings, to feel the frustration around that my mother keeps forgetting that I'm working from home and barges in while I'm surprised she hasn't come in yet, right? And she barges in and she's like, Cindy! And I'm like, I'm on a conference call, right? And I had to also love the fact that I get to see my daughters are going to college, in the fall sometime, right? And so I get to like spend extra time with her. So I get to feel both those things, right? Like the frustration and the disappointment, right? That I don't get to go outside. I don't get to have a graduation celebration like I wanted to. There were so many things I had planned within these couple of months that got canceled. And so I get to feel the disappointment, but I have peace around I don't have to go to anybody's anything and I get to save my money, right? And you can feel that too, right? Also, like be compassionate to yourself, right? We are doing the best that we can given the parameters. Like those of us that are parenting, I have teenagers and they're pretty self-sufficient, but those of you that have little ones at home and you're managing doing the jobs that you're doing during the day, and maybe you've lost your job, right? Maybe you have a loss in income. And so understanding that, I love that someone said sit with yourself, right? Figuring out what do I need for myself right now. Maybe it's like a day of sitting and doing nothing, Maybe it's incorporating self-care practices like Demarcus talked about. Like, I need to put my phone over there and not get on social media. I need to not look at the news until a certain time of day so that you're not inundated with all this information that could be anxiety provoking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really being compassionate to yourself, talking to yourself and treating yourself the same way you would a loved one. Oftentimes we
Mm-hmm.
treat ourselves worse than we treat everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about how could you channel your feelings, channel your energy in ways that would be productive. Like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean, like, for some of us, this is a very productive time. Like, for my business, we thought we would be doing nothing right now because we had all these in-person things that were canceled. Wrong. We are like busiest that we've ever been. I mean, we're blessed and we feel abundant, and we're also like, oh my gosh, right? And we realize that there's this flow that we have learned that we have during this time, right? And that we're
Mm-hmm.
able to channel our energy into that. For some of you, it might be that you learned that you love listening to certain podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
learning about different things and different people. It might be like for Demarcus and his amazing artwork, right? Thinking about how to use his creativity and life coaching skills to really enhance. What do you have in your toolbox to really enhance all of who you are and enhance the world around you, right? Like, what good is it to have if you're not giving it to someone else, right? And that's, of course, thinking about boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about self-care, and thinking about what do you need to thrive at this time. Some of us are not thriving at this time, and that's okay too. And it's acknowledging that you know what, I'm not thriving right now. My homegirl just wrote 3 books, but that's okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
her, right? My time is coming. If that's even in your
What you want to do?
your
Yeah, your
mindset,
plans.
right? Right? And lastly, really just being socially connect with people. I mean, I've made so many amazing connections through things like this. Like, I love being able to support organizations. I'm supporting a nonprofit tomorrow that's doing another talk around how could it's a nonprofit in Rockland County, Tender Steps of New York, that they took the word COVID and made an acronym to help support ways of thriving during this time,
Mm-hmm.
providing tools and strategies, right, for folks. And so think about, what do you have in your toolbox? Everyone has something. And you
Mm-hmm.
may not have thought about what that is, right? It might be creating an intention for platform. It might be creating your vision board. Maybe you haven't thought about what your goals will be, right? Life is still happening no matter what's going on in the world. Life gets to happen still. And so it's really sitting with that. And of course, lastly, it's surrounding yourself around people that will help you thrive in this space, right? I was listening to an Instagram with Will Smith where he talked
Mm-hmm.
about you have a flame, right? The people around you, are they helping to keep your flame lit, or are they
Mm-hmm.
dousing your flame with water, right? And that to
Mm-hmm.
me, it just spoke life to me, because I assure you that I've really set boundaries and limits around what energies I have around me, because I'm very clear that depending on who's around me, I move in the world differently. And so that's definitely some strategies that I would suggest for folks.
Okay.
And I'm really curious too, if other people have ideas, that they please put it in the chat box. I love that. Shao Lib, keep those who light you up. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
I totally agree with you on that. It's interesting that you said some of the things that you said. I think also one of the things for like mental health for myself as well is I've learned not to compare myself to others. And I
Mm,
know that sometimes, like my experience was like was with social media. Like I would look at other artists who were at a certain,
mm,
level where I wasn't at, or I would look at other graphic designers. And then that's where like the voices would come in, and that's when I would have a different conversation with myself. And that's also when I learned that we have more than one voice
yeah.
speaking to us, but we're used to listening, or we're used to hearing a particular voice. And sometimes that voice is the voice that can tell you that you can do it. Sometimes it's the voice that's telling you that you can't do it. Um, and normally, whichever one that you're used to hearing, that's the one that you trust.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I appreciate that. Like like even just being a part of WeINSPIRE, um, we didn't know that this was going to happen, you know.
Mm,
And I just thank, you know, Jamal for just like selecting us for, it, you know, and bringing us together. And, you know, we could totally, we could totally be sitting. Like for I can just speak for myself that like it's really supported me being part of WeINSPIRE because
mm,
you know, being with our ambassadors is like I'm surrounded around three other individuals who are powerful and who are talented and who are creative and they're like impacting the world. And so we come together and when we speak, like putting this project together, like I could be here like not doing anything, you know, but because of the pandemic, you know, like the blessing part of it is, you know, Jamal like opened up the platform for us to spread, you know, our message and impact the
mm,
world. Really before this, I had never went live, you know. So it's almost kind of like he called us forward, you know, into
mm,
doing this, you know. And you know, we came
mm.
together to put the project together, and AD came up with the name and the theme, and Natasha and Jody and myself, we just like carried out the vision, you know, and it ended up expanding into something that we didn't even think of what it was when we first created
Wow,
it, you know. I do want
wow.
to go back. AD did have a question that he wanted to ask. He said, what would you tell a mother or a father watching this live that sees their children drifting and they are afraid to seek help because it's not popular? So what would a parent tell a child about seeking help and knowing, I guess, in their community that it's not popular to seek help?
Mm, that's a powerful question. And in fact, many times it's really having a very basic, intimate conversation that could start with
Mm-hmm,
something like, are you okay?
mm-hmm,
And I would definitely encourage that the parents start with, the caregivers start with sharing a vulnerability, right? Like this
mm-hmm,
COVID-19, it is kind of scary. Or,
mm-hmm,
you know, I'm really disappointed that summer's going to look a little differently this year. You know, what do you think? What are your friends talking about? You know, and definitely making it more of a, or even acknowledging what you've observed. And actually, to speak from experience, my daughter's a senior in high school.
mm-hmm,
And I did start to see there was starting to be some disconnection. I mean, she's
mm-hmm,
like your average teenager that closes the door kind of thing. But
mm-hmm.
I definitely noticed something was shifting. And I said, oh my goodness, I need to connect with her. And so I started with a vulnerability around what was scaring me with what's happening, right? And then, you know, what are your friends talking about, right? Because, of course, teenagers, particularly, depending on the age range of the kid, they love talking about their friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Better than
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And oftentimes when they talk about their friends, they're talking about themselves, you know. And secondly, around the not popular therapy pieces, really normalizing the fact that not being okay is okay,
It's okay. Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
and certainly there are so, I mean, I'm overwhelmed with the emails, right, of resources that are out there. And there are really amazing narratives around how to even engage in conversation with a child depending on their age range around feelings, like developing some kids. I remember when my kids were little, I was a school social worker and I had a feelings chart in my room,
Mm-hmm.
and I would ask them, and you could make them, it could be an arts and craft project with kids.
That's
Um,
dope.
and for, especially right now, what I remember talking to a group of school social workers, and they were talking about they've been recommending to families to develop it as an arts and craft project of different feelings, like looking it up online and looking how the faces look, and then creating it, and that then there would be like an empty space. And so every day they would say, well, how did today go for you? Or how are you feeling right now? And
Mm-hmm.
that way it becomes normalized that we talk about feelings, because many of us come from communities. No one ever asked me how I was feeling in my household in terms of like my
Oh
parents. That
man,
was
yeah.
not a
Same here.
discussion ever. So when I went to social work school, I'm like, what are you asking me about my feelings every day? What is this? You know, so it was definitely like a learning for many of us. Many of us come from communities where it wasn't okay to talk about feelings because that became a protective measure, right? Being a person of color in uh, systems that are inequitable and oppressive, right? Like that's a whole nother conversation where we're dealing with generational and collective trauma, right? And so part of not seeking mental health and wellness support, it feeds into that trauma. And so we want to really normalize that it's okay to talk about feelings. It's okay to talk about not being okay. And that there are people that could talk. I mean, I know that different schools have different support systems currently. Some schools have guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists that are providing different ways of support. And I would inquire with the child's teacher because sometimes there are support systems that perhaps the school hasn't really clarified what's happening right now. But I know that there are a lot of schools that are creating different platforms for young people to really talk about what they're experiencing at this time. This is very traumatic for everyone, but particularly for children. Think about the socialization that takes place in schools for our children, right? That's not happening right now. Our middle schoolers, particularly, our high schoolers, anyone that has a milestone age where they're not having celebrations and graduations, right? And so it's cool to be tough, right? To be like, I'm okay, right? And many
I
of
don't talk
us,
about it.
our kids don't even see us vulnerable, and so really I invite you to put that guard down and like at least once a week, the kids are sick of me. I'm like, let's talk about how everyone's feeling.
Feeling.
They just about sick of me. But guess what? I hear them talking to their friends about feelings.
Oh.
And so, sometimes they might be nasty at first, but I encourage you not to give up, to be persistent and consistent with your love, with your empathy, right? And really your overall support. And that's with all members of your family.
Dope, dope, dope. Our ambassador Jody is here. Hey, Jody. Jody says in rural communities like where she lives don't have support systems that look like us. This makes it very hard and difficult to connect sometimes. Do you have any suggestions about that?
Yes, I would suggest, first of all, yes, people that look like you provide a thank you. Someone said I have a beautiful spirit. Thank you. God bless your heart. So I would say that seeking supports from folks that look like us is very important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And seeking support, period, is just as important.
It's important.
And so open-mindedness around people's positionality and the ways that they can support you is critical at this time. I work at a school of social work, so I've seen amazing folks that are not of color that come to the work because they want to disrupt systems, disrupt the myth around mental health, and they do good work. And I've seen the opposite, right? So it's really about being able to discern, right? Being able to ask the questions and also seek in places where you might not have otherwise considered. So what do I mean by that? So I was invited to be a part of a Facebook group. And at first I'm like, I'm trying to limit my social media intake. That's part of my self-care.
That's self-care. I feel you. I got it. I'm right here
But I
with you.
couldn't help but be a part because it was about families of color and how we're coping, folks with children around this COVID-19. And I have to tell you that I've gotten the most amazing strategies and no one there is, and we're talking about support that's not like that next level where psychiatric advisement is needed, right? Because then that is definitely where I would recommend that wherever you could seek the support, you get the support and then you advocate for yourself along the way, right? Because the important part is to get the support, especially if there's a psychiatric crisis, if there's a psychotic breakdown. That's key. First and foremost, get the support, and then you advocate for yourself along the way. Because as persons of color, oftentimes we have to do that, right? And secondly, be open-minded to where that support can come from. I've gotten the most amazing feedback and information sharing from this Facebook group that I almost didn't join because someone added me and I was like, I don't need to be a part of another group. So I would say, look around right now. Looking cyberly might be the best for now.
Mm-hmm.
And also think about what your role could possibly be in creating such support systems, right?
I like that.
Oftentimes we get to create what we want to see in the world, and then we could reach out to folks. Sometimes there's a couple of people that reach out to me about things that maybe I was thinking about doing, but I just don't have the wherewithal to plan. But then they're like, Cindy, would you mind doing this and this? I'm like, sure, I'll be a part of that. Like right now, I'm running a Spanish group for men and women on Friday nights. I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it, but it wasn't until a friend of mine said, hey, would you be interested in helping me to facilitate this group? I was like, okay. The group was already there. So I would definitely think about those things.
Okay, okay. I like what you said. And the funny thing is, I was having a conversation with somebody today about something, and what I heard you say was like a life lesson that I had before. Like be, I think it's like be the difference or be the change that you
Right.
want in the world. So it's like we're
Mm-hmm.
always searching for this change, or we're searching for something, but it's like it starts with you. Like be that. Like once you become that, then like it comes to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a question. We have 10 minutes left, so I do know that it will kick us out.
Okay.
So I want to get some questions in. Antoine, Jody, and Natasha, if you have any questions that you want to ask today, send it to me while we're asking this question. So we have a question from Child Live, and my apologies if I'm saying it wrong. She said, in your intro, you mentioned caring for your mom in AZ in Arizona. Um, well, okay, no, not Arizona, but you mentioned caring for your mom. She would like to know how have you managed your emotions dealing with that and also carving time out for yourself.
That's an excellent question. So my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's last year. And so I've observed that she has definitely been deteriorating. So thankfully, she has the home attendant that comes. I had
Okay.
to advocate for the home attendant to come 7 days a week. Uh, the home attendant, one of them comes Monday through Friday, 9 to 1, and the Saturday, 9 to 1. So what I've done is I've set boundaries even around like the work that I do with her. I do have siblings, and I'm fortunate that I have siblings. Right now, they can't physically be here with her because of social distancing, but we've been doing like Zoom meetings, and that's been
Mm-hmm.
kind of working out, right? And my mother's church friends have also been doing like WhatsApp chats that I've helped support her around.
Mm-hmm.
And I set clear boundaries with my mom even. I do, she likes to listen to the rosary. She plays the
Mm-hmm.
rosary. She's Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So what I realized is that while I don't consider myself Catholic anymore, it doesn't mean that I can't support her in the journey. So we open up the computer and I put in a Spanish rosary for her to listen to. And then that's the activity that we do almost every night for 30 minutes. And
Wow.
sometimes I spend a little bit more time with her depending on what we're doing. And then I walk her back down. She lives on the first floor, so I live on the second
Mm-hmm.
floor. And then I walk her back down and I'm like, good night. Right? And it was hard. It was hard because when she found out that I was home all day, oh my goodness, it was like
I
that
can
first
imagine.
week. It was like, oh, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And it was just like, no, no, we're not doing that. On Saturday, I am not like watching novelas all day. Like I'm not doing that, right? I did have to seek support from my siblings around. You got to figure out how during this global pandemic, how we're going to support mom because it is like all me right now. And so I think that's her now. We've been able to carve out, I have children, the teenage children help me
Mm-hmm.
also.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband is amazing. He helps me with her as well. And I'm very clear, in the morning I do meditation, I do prayer, I do journaling. So my self-care game around my own mental health and wellness is very strong. It needs to be strong because I very clear that as a supporter of so many people with so many systems and when I move in the world as a healer, I have to make sure that I'm doing the work for myself. And so in doing that work, it's the boundary setting, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
boundary setting that mom, I can't do that today. She wanted me to perm her hair. So we had this whole conversation around hair and so I said I can't do it. I did it when I did it and then it was really her understanding that I get to help her when I can, and that it's okay on the times that I can't. And I had to be okay with that because I did feel guilty at first setting those boundaries. I did. But definitely I feel great about that now. And I feel also I've educated myself around the disease so that I
Mm-hmm.
know what to expect and what are the best practices and ways to support her around structure and medication and things of that nature. And so it's been multifaceted ways of supporting myself and supporting her in the space of the community that we find ourselves in.
Oh, that's dope. Thank you for sharing that with us, by the way, too.
Yeah, sure.
And Charlie, I have to apologize because I am not used to going IG Live. So when I saw the whole AZ, my mind kind of went blank for a little bit, you know. So I definitely understood, but when I saw it, I did say Arizona. So my apologies. Um, okay, so we have a couple more minutes left. Is there anything that you want to leave with us tonight, Cindy? Any final thought?
Any final thought? I invite you to take this time to really assess where you're at in your life. Really assessing where does self-love show up for you? What does it look like?
Hmm.
And really consider, and sort of not good or bad in judgment on yourself, but really just kind of gauging where you're at. Where are the opportunities during this crazy time, right? There are opportunities perhaps that we're not looking at, and definitely connect with folks that are there to support you. Sometimes we have people in our space that can really help us thrive, and we may not have considered that, right?
Hmm.
And so if you haven't done I was talking to someone earlier and they said, what am I doing a vision board for? 2020 is done. I'm like, for who? As far as I'm
Right,
concerned, 2020 is still here, right?
right.
So there is so much that you get to do. You get to be creative around that, right? What that looks like. But take time to really love on yourself. Love on yourself more than you ever had in your life. Life is precious. Life is short, but you get to live it to the best of your capacity.
Well, thank you, thank you. And how can we find you, Cindy?
You can find me at www.velocityvisionsinc.com. I'm at Velocity Visions Inc. on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.
Uh,
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much for
much for
tonight. I
joining us
appreciate
tonight.
you. We Inspire Movement and Demarcus. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not just me, it's a whole movement. On behalf of We Inspire, on behalf of Jamal, on behalf of the board directors and the 2020 ambassadors, we thank you. We thank you for joining us tonight. We thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with us. This was a dope conversation tonight. And I really thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here, Cindy. Thank you for trusting me and being here tonight.
Of course. I love you, Demarcus.
I love you too, Cindy.
Have
Thank
a
you.
good night, everyone.
Thank you, thank you. And everyone, if you'd like to know any more information about We Inspire, if you would like to purchase any paraphernalia, you can go to the website at www.weinspiremovement.org. If you would like to get a little sprinkle of inspiration, go to the website, go to our Instagram account, and you'll find some more things. And also, I'd like to say, if you have just any good news that you just want to share within the world, send an email or send a message to the Instagram account, and Jamal and the interns will take in your submission and possibly publish that to create some impact and some power and some love and some healing within this world. All right. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I gotta go because we have an ambassadors meeting tonight. So thank you, Cindy.
All right. Good night.
All right, everybody.
Good night.